Welcome to the Marketing Mortgages podcast by Social for Brokers. Now, today I have with me Rachel Southcott, who runs the Financial Marketeer. So you can probably see her if you're watching on YouTube. You'll see her on the camera. If you don't watch on YouTube, make sure you pop us on and have a little look. Now, Rachel's been helping people in the financial services sector, and what she's been doing is helping them generate inbound inquiries since 2015, which is like nearly 10 years now. Probably doesn't feel that, does it? Been a bit longer than you think. So she's really passionate about something that a lot of mortgage brokers are too, especially at the minute, and that's not paying for leads. So today she's going to talk us through how important the likes of Google Ads are, SEO and pay-per-click, and how important they can be for your business, and even share some really useful tips along the way. So Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm surprised actually that it's taken us this long. I feel like we've been talking to each other for such a long time. And yeah, I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having it. So we did have this booked in, I think it was before Christmas actually. And we were speaking and we were like, we are both so busy. Is there any chance we should rearrange this? And Rachel was like, yep, that's fine. So we rearranged it for today. So we finally got you on. So thanks for carving time out your day, Rachel, to come on. Thank you.
No problem at all.
So we always start on the podcast giving a bit of a background of the guests that we have on. So could you give us a bit of an understanding of what you did before now, how you got to the point you are now, and what you do on a day-to-day basis as well, please?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, almost 10 years now working in marketing and specifically in the financial sector. So when I graduated, I did a degree in business admin and Spanish. So there was a little bit of marketing in there, but not a lot.
Cool.
So as soon as I graduated, I applied for a bunch of jobs, as most people do, with not really an awful lot of understanding or direction as to what exactly I wanted to do. So some of the jobs I applied for were actually in recruitment, but it just so happened that the job I got was marketing. And I've just continued with that ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So the first few jobs I had all happened to be, again, this was by complete coincidence. They all just happened to be related to like financial sector or property or something like that. So I worked for a pension transfer company, a company that specialized in bridging loans and peer-to-peer property finance, debt recovery. So one way or another, it was all financial services. And I was in-house for about 4 years, I think. So not an awful lot of time. And then I had kind of worked my way up quite quickly. And in the most recent employed role before going freelance, I was the marketing director there. So I'd kind of built up a team around me. I think when we started, I think it was just myself and one other person in the marketing team.
Right.
And we'd built that up. I think I hired maybe 5 people and built out the team there. And it got to the point where, because I was at that level, I wasn't really involved in the day-to-day marketing, creative stuff and running the campaigns. It was more like people management and talking to stakeholders and that sort of stuff. And I'd missed out on the fun part of it. And so that's kind of the point where I thought,
get your hands dirty.
I think I can do this on my own. I decided to go freelance. So that was almost 6 years ago now. And given that I'd already worked in the financial sector, it just made sense for me to start building out a bit of a niche for myself in financial services. And so that's what I've done.
Okay, so got an understanding of how you got to where you are today. So can you tell us a bit about what you do day to day with your clients at the minute, Rachel?
Yeah, sure. It's quite varied depending on, who I'm working with at the time and what their objectives are. So I get quite a lot of different projects come through. And so over time, even from, day to day, week to week, my schedule can change quite a lot, which is good because that's what
I say. Do you enjoy that? Is that?
Yeah. I think that's one thing that I always struggled with, actually, like working in-house and being employed, was that there wasn't that diversity.
Flexibility, yeah.
So I really like that now, and I think it makes me like it helps to make sure I don't get bored, and it challenges.
Always doing something new, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So at the moment, what projects have I got on? So I've recently started working with an equity release advisor, and he's up against a bit of a challenge because I don't know if you're aware of this, but as an equity release advisor, you need to write a certain amount of business in order to kind of maintain your status.
Okay, no, didn't know that.
Yeah, so he is kind of up against a bit of a deadline to get some new cases, like not only like start working on them, but actually get them completed.
Get them through. Yeah. So they've got to be good quality then.
Yeah, so he's already had an extension. So that's kind of why he got in touch, is he said, look, I think he needs 3 cases finished and complete by May.
Oh, wow.
So not only do we need to generate them, he needs to do all the work and everything. So that's kind of why he got in touch. And I believe he spoke to myself and a few other people, but he said the reason why he wanted to work with me is because of the background in financial services, the understanding of equity release. I've already been working with another company that specializes in equity release for 5 years now. So I think that gave him the confidence. So what we're doing is a Facebook campaign, because we have the ability to target people in a specific area, over the age of 55. So we, by doing that, we're really targeted. So we're currently in the process. We've kind of put the creatives together, put the plan and the copy together, and we are, within the next couple of days, we should be going live. So fingers crossed, we're going to get people
Awesome.
coming.
So you talk about sort of paid social as well, and we'll definitely get into that. You talk about kind of SEO, PPC, email marketing. How do you keep on top of it? Because mortgage brokers listening to this, they might be thinking, oh, I could do this all myself. Is it doable themselves? Is it possible?
I would say no.
Okay, right.
I definitely advise people to try and generate leads through more than one source, because that's one thing that I have found working with advisors and brokers, is that a lot of them are heavily reliant on just one source of new business. So that could typically, especially in the early days, it's typically referrals. And then, it might be that they purchase leads, but it's usually just 1 or 2 sources of business. And so you really do want to focus your marketing efforts so that you can expand that and have, 3, 4, 5 different streams of where your inquiries come from. But as for doing it all yourself, that is
quite a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to discuss a few things that you could maybe put into best practices for a website that Rachel will talk you through. But I think if you want to go down that, if you're going to spend a lot of money on paid advertising, and it's best to always get an expert. So let's break down each area then. So if we start with SEO and PPC, what's the main difference between the two, Rachel?
So with SEO and PPC, the objective of both of them is to appear at the top of page 1 on Google search results. I say Google, it could actually be Bing or other search engines.
People still use Bing. Is it still? Do people still use
I
it?
haven't met anyone who uses Bing.
No,
but
nor have I.
like to caveat whenever I'm talking about, PPC, SEO, because we all just refer to Google because that's what we know. But so for the purposes of this podcast, we'll talk about Google. So that is the aim of both of them. They've both got the same objective. You want to appear on page 1 of Google search results for specific queries that are relevant to your business. So that could be, for example, somebody searching for, a mortgage broker that works with first-time buyers, or it could be specializes in NHS workers, for example. But the key difference between the two is that with PPC and Google Ads, it is called, you're paying to be there. You've got to have a solid budget to put behind those advertisements to actually appear at the top of page 1. Whereas with SEO, you're doing a lot of groundwork on your website, creating content, making sure it's optimized so that you appear organically. You don't have to put ad spend behind appearing there. You might have to pay somebody to help optimize it for search and create content, but you don't have to actually pay any advertising for it to be there.
Right. Okay. So so organic or paid. So breaking those two down, it's different to social media. And this is why it's great to get experts on about this, because it's something we don't speak about. So it's always good to get your view on it. When you spend the money on the PPC, and it's a very different audience to social media, isn't it? Because if you're typing into Google bad credit mortgages, you essentially need it there or then. Whereas social media, we're trying to warm them up for 6 to 12 months. So organic social media, I mean. So when people click on that advert, what are some of the things that people can do with their website to try and convert them into a lead? Because we're only half the job's only been done, hasn't it, by getting them to the website? Then if your website's a load of rubbish, you're never going to really get that lead, are you? So what can people do, or what are the best practices for websites when they click on that lead?
So one of the first things you want to make sure of is that whatever content you have on that web page, it is very, very specific to what somebody has searched for. So as an example, if you've got a campaign that's about first-time buyers, there might be like a wide range of different search queries that a first-time buyer puts into Google search. Let's say that they are looking for information specifically about stamp duty.
Mm-hmm.
That search query might trigger your ad, and then they'll click on your advert, go through to your website. But if you haven't spoken about stamp duty on that page, they're going to bounce straight away.
Right.
Really, you have to make sure that it's very, very specific to the query, and that it's, as soon as they land there, the page title, the first paragraph, everything is crystal clear that answers their query.
Mm-hmm.
And it's converting them, you want to make sure that the call to action, we call it, so that could be like a button or a form. It's whatever action you want them to take on that page. Again, that needs to be really, really clear. I've seen some people have it toward the bottom of the page, and it's kind of almost blended into the footer. So if it's like a
Right.
button or a form asking someone to make an inquiry, it's kind of hidden right at the bottom of the page, blended in. And
Really? So it reduces the chances of people reaching out. Sometimes they can't even
exactly,
find it.
yeah. They can't even find it. They don't notice it. It's easily, and this is the sort of stuff that when you spell it out, it seems quite obvious to
Mm-hmm.
do these things, but actually people don't always follow best practice. It's not until you've got a bit of a checklist to say, right, these are all the things that you should do on your landing page. Then you're like, actually, when I compare my,
Makes sense.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
making it as simple as possible, isn't it? Like if you think like the Uber app, we liken it to the Uber app. You don't, all you have to do is put your postcode in. You don't then have to do a drop down menu to choose which car you want. And then you don't have, do you know what I mean? It's big buttons. It's right, here you are. Which of these three taxis do you want? Well, obviously you want the cheapest one. So I click on the top one, the Uber Comfort. I nearly booked an Uber Comfort on Saturday night instead of an Uber X. I was like, it's an extra £7 just to be
I
cut.
thank you.
Well, I've had a few beers. It doesn't matter where I'm sat. I just want to be in the back of a car. But what I'm saying is the Uber app, very simple. It's very self-explanatory. You almost suppose want to land on that landing page and be like, right, that's the information. I know I'm in the right place. How do I book an appointment?
Yes,
Make it
exactly.
as simple.
Yeah, make it as simple as possible, crystal clear. This is what you have to do. And I think a lot of people overlook that. You literally have to spell it out. If you want to book an appointment, fill
Press
out this
here.
form or click
Yeah.
here, and sometimes people just kind of like try and be a bit clever with their marketing and maybe do a bit of a play on words. Don't do any of that stuff. Just
Okay, right. So that's a tip then. So just don't like skirt around the subject. Tell them exactly what you want them to do.
exactly. Yeah.
What one interesting thing we spoke about David before we came on the podcast, actually, David Miles from the PPC machine. He was talking about buttons and how different wording. So I think when we used to do websites for people, we did a button that said inquire now. And he said it's almost like you're trying to submit, sorry, it's very submissive language, like inquire now, instead of get me my free mortgage appointment or something a bit softer. Is there some psychology around the wording that you should use on your landing page?
Absolutely, yeah. And I've actually been looking more into this recently. Copywriting is so important in influencing people.
Mm-hmm.
But the words you use can have such a big impact on people's perceptions, their expectations, and then what they do next.
Mm.
Down to individual words as well. It's really, really interesting
Crazy, really interesting, yeah, to get
psychology
somebody to,
behind it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole new world that's,
So that's something completely different on landing pages. So,
yeah, it's not different. It's just such a huge area of like study and understanding.
mhm,
Um, yeah,
something that you get an expert involved in. So we've got them to the page. We want to make sure that that heading tells them exactly that they're there at the right place. We spoke about first time buyers and stamp duty, for example. Um, we then get them to book an appointment. Is there anything that you then recommend in terms of like a follow up to confirm their appointment? Is there a series of emails? Is there any best best practices in that essence?
Yeah, so you can, well, depending on, what your setup is, what CRM and software you're using, you should be able to, at the very least, create like an automated email. So as soon as they've submitted an inquiry, you want
Hmm.
that to trigger off an automated email to them just to confirm that the inquiry's been received and you'll get back to them. And also set expectations in that email. Let them know how you'll get back to them, how quickly they should expect you to get back to them, and then actually do it. That's
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
one thing that
delivering it.
I found. Yeah, I mean, as someone who provides this sort of service, there's only so much I can do on behalf of the client until it's handed over to them. And so at
And
that
they've actually
point,
got to phone the people up and
yeah,
do the
and I,
appointment. Yeah.
have to do my homework. It's like, oh, you received an inquiry yesterday. Have you got back to them yet? Like, come on. Um, so yeah, so
So in those emails, tell them what you're going to do and then deliver on it. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And in terms of like the call to action, obviously the example we've used here is to book an appointment. That's what everybody wants, right? You want someone to go straight in and book that appointment. But sometimes they're not necessarily there yet. They don't necessarily want to book an appointment just yet. And you don't want to lose people. If they've come to your website, you want to know who that person is. So an alternative is to use what would be called a lead magnet. So not everybody's a fan of this because they want the inquiry, but there are other ways that you can capture leads and information. So you could have, for example, like a checklist. So you could have a nice branded PDF document, and it could be a checklist of things to consider, when you move, or things
Hmm.
to consider when applying for a mortgage, things like that. Fairly straightforward documents, quite basic knowledge. But with doing that, when you encourage people to download it, in order to download it, they'll submit their contact information. And you can then, off the back of that, send them a series of like lead nurturing emails,
Mm.
bit of a workflow to kind of keep them engaged. And then hopefully when they are ready to book an appointment and speak with you, you'll be one of the first people that springs to mind.
Because you've been drip feeding information into their inbox over the last week or month or however long it's been.
Yeah.
Nice. It's a really good idea, that. Okay, so then talking about, I suppose, the cost element. So how much should you be spending on PPC? And I know that's the magic question, but how much do you spend on PPC and how much should you pay for a lead through PPC?
So it depends. Obviously, it depends on so many factors, but my recommendations to clients always depend on the size of their company and what their objectives are. If I'm speaking to a brokerage that has multiple advisors in their practice, their requirements in terms of lead gen are going to be very different to a solo broker who's self-employed and just needs to generate enough business for themselves. So
Hmm.
first of all, that tells you kind of budget requirements are going to be quite different. So
Hmm.
it really does start with understanding from the client's perspective, how many, what's their conversion rate look like?
Hmm.
How, out of 20 inquiries, how many might convert, and kind of working it backwards from there and understanding how many do they need. In an ideal world, everybody wants, a limitless, endless
A
supply.
pound for a lead, good leads as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but getting a really realistic expectation of, okay, well, how many could you handle? That's another
Hmm.
conversation that I have with
That's
quite
a
a lot
good
of
point.
people, actually, is that they say, oh, I don't want to be inundated with the leads. And I'm like, let's just take this one step at a time. You're not going to click your fingers and get
Yeah,
50
leads straight off the
inquiries.
bat.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's not going to work like that. But I do have quite a few people say that to me, oh, I don't want to press live on a campaign and get all these inquiries and be inundated. That would be the dream. But yeah, so kind of working it backwards from there, really. But
Hmm.
as a very kind of generic figure that I give people, that's the minimum based on, I've been doing this for years now.
Experience. Yeah.
Yeah, like across Google Ads and LinkedIn and Facebook, the bare minimum would be £500 a month, which is a lot of money.
Hmm.
And that's just for the ad spend. So that wouldn't include, like, if you were working with someone like myself, instead of doing the ads
Hmm.
DIY version, if you wanted someone support like me, that doesn't even include my fees.
Hmm.
So it
That's
is.
understandable. You've got to be paid to do. And this is what I would say. People, if you are listening to this, thinking about getting somebody SEO and or PPC involved, try and go to a specialist because, as Rachel said, what 2015, so coming up to 10 years of being in the financial services sector, that is worth its weight in gold, really, because you'll know what works and what doesn't work and the legalities around that. You could hire an agency that has no understanding of the FS industry, and you could spend 3 months ad spend just figuring out what works. So I would always, and look, we always talk about niche markets. Do the same when you're looking for marketing agencies. Always pick somebody within the niche. But you're thinking about 500 quid and then management fee on top.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point there, it's not only a case of I've spoken to a lot of brokers who have dabbled in Google Ads themselves and have said, oh, I went away and I watched a couple of YouTube videos and I gave it a go myself. And I always can't help but think, imagine if I said, oh, I watched a couple of YouTube videos about how to write a mortgage for someone and I'm going to give it a go. Like
Oh
mortgage
yeah, never thought
would
about that.
be like, what? Like you
Yeah,
can't do that. Like the
yeah.
audacity, right? The audacity to think that you could go and watch a couple of YouTube videos and then go and write a mortgage. But for some reason, when it comes to marketing, people assume that, it's marketing. Like if I just watch this or read that, I'll be able to go and do it. And there is so much more that goes into it. They're
Mm.
really, especially with Google Ads, like there is so many little pieces of the puzzle that all come together that
And
you,
that's it's exactly, I've been doing social media now for probably near on 8 years, and I don't profess to be a social media expert. Now, I've been in this marketing industry for 8 years. I know nothing about Google Ads, and that's somebody who's in the sector. So I think it'd be very hard for somebody to pick up Google Ads and do it themselves, or do it well. Sorry, you can do it, but it'd be a moneyless pit. So if we move on to SEO now, because I saw on your Instagram stories a few weeks ago, you have got a company on page one for a certain search term, haven't you? Now, SEO isn't a quick fix, is it?
no, it's not.
Long-term game. So talk us through, what does SEO do for a company? And again, are there any tips that you can give for people to change their website? Because SEO is a bit easier than PPC when it comes to that, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, personally, I do think SEO is perhaps the most underrated of marketing channels,
Okay.
especially within financial services. I think because it doesn't provide a quick win and because it's not necessarily easy to measure the ROI, I do think it gets overlooked. And I
Hmm.
also think because perhaps people don't understand or they haven't got the patience to
Time, isn't it? It's the time and the patience to do it.
exactly, yeah. But once you've got it going, it's going to provide results time and again. And I like to compare it with social media. And I'm not saying pick one or the other, but if you think about it this way, right? So with this social media post, if you think about the amount of time and effort it takes you to create one social media post and the lifespan of that post. So it could live on LinkedIn for maybe up to a week before it's no longer visible,
Hmm.
on Instagram stories for 24 hours before it's no longer visible. So it's got a very, very limited lifespan.
Hmm.
But when you create content for SEO and for your website, that has an endless lifespan. And if it's ranking on page one, the return on investment for that is, time and time and time again without having to keep investing in creating the content.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's there. It's evergreen, isn't it? It can stay there and it can keep ranking and going up and going up and going up.
Yeah, so if you were to turn on, like if you were to stop posting on social media tomorrow, you're probably going to, the inquiries would dry up overnight. You're going to stop
Hmm.
getting impressions, stop getting engagement immediately. Whereas with SEO, if you've got a really good piece of content that ranks well, it's going to stay there for years.
Mm.
Without
Very
having,
good point.
yeah. So that's why I'm such a big advocate of SEO, and I really do want more financial services companies to get involved in it. But as for I think that kind of explains the benefits, right? Is one,
Massively, yeah. And
yeah,
it's, is it because people don't get involved with it because it takes longer to write a blog post and it's not as sexy as social media? This is what Alex Curtis talks about from the Lead Engine, is the SEO delivers, the social media is like the sexy front of the business. And that's, people like, social media is such a buzzword. SEO was a massive buzzword during like the dot-com boom and everything, wasn't it? And with SEO, I think it's a longer form piece of content, isn't it? And that's where, right. So when we talk about a longer form, talking about like a blog post that answers a very specific question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, one of the big differences between the two is that social media is like kind of front facing, like you're out there, people can see you, you can show off what you're doing, show your brand. But with SEO, you're only going to be found if someone searches for you. So if we about like, trying to build a personal brand and create a perception and get yourself out there, you can't really do that with SEO, and you certainly not in the same way that you can with social media.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of like the two, one thing that I always kind of let clients know, if I'm going to start working with somebody for the purposes of SEO, I always highlight the fact that once you've written an article, yes, the primary objective is for it to rank on page one of Google, but actually that article then feeds your social media content and your newsletter if you've got one. So it is kind of like a building block for all of your marketing channels. So whilst you might have to wait a few months for it to rank,
Hmm.
you can get an immediate benefit from your blog content by posting it on your social media channels, putting it in your newsletter, and even thinking about how to repurpose it. You could break it down and, or even you could create a video off the back of it. You could pull out the key points from your blog article, record a quick video. Before you know it, this one piece of content that you were reluctant to write has fed 4 other marketing initiatives. So yeah, I mean, as you can tell, I'm a huge advocate.
Advocate of a repurpose. Do you know what? It's funny because I've just before recording this one with Rachel, I've been on Ash Borland's podcast, and one of my main points was trying to make your content work harder for you. And it
Yeah,
was exactly that. Turn a social media post about should I have a 2 or a 5 year fixed rate, turn it into a blog post, turn it into a video, then turn it into a carousel. You're exactly the same. What you've said is do the hard work up front with the blog post, because that's
the longer
a
form.
very valuable piece, and then go and break it down, go and read the script off into a video. So
Yeah,
I think you and I align, even though we work in different areas of marketing. There's no reason you can't take that blog and repurpose it, as you said, to an email. Or how about a free download for a lead magnet or a video or a carousel? It's so true to when you make something for your business, don't just use it once.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's a bit different with blog posts, but I would recommend posting that now, but then in 6 weeks' time as well, because not every one of your audience is going to see it. So make sure you use it again on social media. Okay, awesome. So SEO, make sure you're writing topical content. Um, I would say, and I don't know if you disagree with me, ideas for social media content, ideas for blog content, use questions that people are asking you on an everyday basis.
Yeah,
Because it seems like
absolutely.
those are ones that people are typing in Google anyway.
Exactly that. Yeah. And the more specific the question and the answer, the more likely you are to appear in Google search.
Hmm.
So you want to get really, really specific about these questions. And arguably, like the search volume and the amount of people that are looking for the answer to that question is going to be smaller. But the
Hmm.
point is, because your blog article really, get straight to the point of that specific question, you're going to have so much more chance of appearing at the top of page one. And that's exactly the strategy that I use for my clients. So that example that you just mentioned that you saw on my LinkedIn, that's just one example of many whereby I've managed to get someone not only on page one, but actually in the featured snippet, is by using that strategy. Very, very specific topic
Hmm.
related to, equity release or any type of mortgage.
Could you explain to us what the featured snippet is? Because I only heard about this, say, last year. Could you explain what that featured snippet is?
Yeah, so when you search for, I mean, Google search results appear differently all the time, right? Depending on what you put in. So sometimes it might be shopping results at the top, or it might be video links. But there is, I think you'll always see like there's a bunch of questions. So it's normally it appears as like a more prominent result.
Yeah.
So it will be like bigger font, it will kind of be like projected out into a bit of a box, and it might have a photo next to it. So it's kind of a regular text-based search result, but it's almost like highlighted in a
Jazzed up almost. Yeah.
kind of pushed to the front and center. Um, just so that as you're scrolling through the results, it is front and center. It's the most prominent thing. And, arguably it's in terms of trying to appear at the top of page one of search results, like you couldn't really get any better than a feature.
Better. Almost gives you like, so I was just about to use the word snippet. It will give you a little snippet of the article in the
Yes.
hope that that user then clicks into it to your website. So it's a massive thing, and by the sounds of it, for that search term was a huge deal. So before we get into the strategy question, we like to make a donation of £10 to a charity that's close to your heart. Which charity did you want us to make the donation to, Rachel?
I would like to donate to the Brain Tumor Charity, please.
Perfect. We will make that donation for you. So now into the strategy question, which a lot of people like the answers to because they get so many different ideas of how to generate leads. So we're going to pretend. Where are you based anyway, Rachel? Are you down south?
Yeah, in Dartford in Kent.
Oh, okay, perfect. So this works perfectly then. So we're going to pretend you've moved to the very north of Scotland, right? You've got a laptop, a mobile phone, and an internet connection. What would you do to start generating new mortgage business?
Oh, new mortgage business. Okay.
Well, mortgage business, financial, new business as a whole.
Okay. My answer is probably going to be very obvious and probably a bit boring. But there would be a variety of platforms that I would use. But in order of preference, I would probably invest the majority of my time and effort on LinkedIn. So I'd
Okay.
want to be, connecting with people in the local area, um, and creating content that's specific to the area as well.
Okay, yeah. Oh,
Maybe
to the area rather than the. Okay, that's interesting. So,
if I moved all the way up in North Scotland and I'm trying to generate mortgage leads, I probably want to be, targeting people that are
are in
thinking
that
about
locally.
moving. Yeah. So I might even go and film some content near like a popular landmark, or maybe take
Ah,
photos near a popular landmark, so that if someone's scrolling through their social feed, if they recognize it, it might get them to stop and be like, hold on a minute, I recognize that place. This person must be round the corner. Um, so yeah, so I'd probably start there and engage with people. Once I've connected with a few people that live local, start engaging with their content just to try and build a bit of a name for myself
yeah.
within like the LinkedIn community up in the top of North Scotland.
I love that because there's me thinking when you said this is going to be quite obvious, I thought it was going to be you saying, oh, so I'd set up my website and I'd write 10 articles on SEO. But like you said, I suppose that's a longer form game, isn't it? Whereas with this with LinkedIn, it's going to be all about those quick wins. And I love the idea of using local landmarks to pull people in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that would be something that I'd recommend anybody on this podcast, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram, don't just do that at the beginning of your business. Like, go and take a walk in a local park, take a photo of it, go and show that you're in the local community because people will always want to do business with people near to them rather than a million miles away.
Yeah. And another point, off this idea of photographing and videoing yourself in an area that's kind of known,
Mhm.
people like to share their own experiences and talk about their own, so if they saw that sort of video or photo and recognized it, they're more likely to comment on your post and be like, oh, I was there last week, or oh my gosh, this is just 2 minutes from my house. So it's a
Common
good way
ground, isn't it?
to strike
It's
up. Yeah, it's an easy way for people, because I think a lot of times people want to comment, but they don't necessarily know what
what
to
to comment
write.
about. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
Well, it's very similar to Ash and I were talking about brand anchors, which I talk about a lot, and it came from Ash's podcast. Is that is a brand anchor because it's something that they can speak to you about that's not about your business, but it opens a conversation, doesn't it? And then people automatically think, oh, Rachel's the one that takes her dog for a walk in the north of Scotland. And
yeah.
it's so much easier for people to open those conversations. So absolutely love that. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to talk through SEO, PPC, and LinkedIn as well, which is obviously where you spend a lot of your time. If people want to connect with you, what's the best platform that they can do so?
Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Search for Rachel Southcott, you'll find me. And yeah, also my website, thefinancialmarketer.co.uk.
Perfect. And I know what Rachel does is she gives a lot of value away on LinkedIn. So make sure you follow her and engage with the content. There won't be any photos of her in North Scotland, but there might be some of them down in Kent. Rachel, thank you very much for coming on and spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.